Dick Hughes, C. Richard is what I go by. And the Richard comes from Dick Johnson, who was Bob Johnson's brother. And so he died in an airplane crash in 47 in a travel air on an elk count down in Wyoming. And I was born in 43. He died in maybe it was 48, but it's somewhere back in there. And I was named after him. My other brother was named after Bob Johnson, and he is the last of our family. So the family history, both parents are from Montana. Father born in Butte. And of course, he doesn't have the same name as a Johnson because the Johnson was his stepfather. And mother born in the little old mining town outside of Helena called Marysville, where her father was the superintendent of schools and the postmaster and ran the grocery store. And it's a marvelous little ghost town, about 50 miles out of Helena. They spent most of their time growing up in Montana. Dad moved to Missoula when my grandmother got rid of her husband, Grandpa Hughes, who I have met only once that I know of. And that was about 7 or 8 years old when riding with my father in a helicopter that they had just purchased at Johnson Flying Service back in 1948. He was the first helicopter pilot in Montana. And he landed in his father's backyard in Butte. Yeah, that was the only time that I can remember that I actually met the guy. And that's pretty much it. They stayed in Montana all the way through. I kind of grew up, well, not kind of, I did grow up on the airport here in Missoula used to be out by the fairgrounds, which is south of town. Right now there's a high school on it and it's next to the fairgrounds as that site. And that was what was known as Hale Field. And where all the jumper operation and firefighting operations, the aerial part of it, were based. Meaning just during the day based, they had a warehouse out there and they had a jumper ready shack and the airplanes were there. It was only 3 blocks from my house, so as a kid I virtually just lived there. And as growing up, things were a whole lot more lax before OSHA came along, and so when I'm in grade school, they could have a fire call on a DC-3 or a Ford Trimotor, and if the pilot was of the mind to, he would let me just come on and keep my mouth shut and ride along. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. My eyes were way too bad at that time that I really believed to be a pilot. And as it turns out anyway, I did get my license, I did get a commercial license, I do have an instrument license, but I'm a lousy pilot. So when you grow up around really good pilots, I was never really very good at instrument flying. Plus the fact that I was 2400 corrected, and back then pilots that went to the airlines and all were supposed to be pretty close to perfect in every way. Grandfather Dick was flying the airplane. They were very instrumental in the beginnings of it and the training of it, both here and over in Winthrop, Washington. They were back and forth with the airplanes based out of here. And training in both operations in 39 and early 40 before the summer came along. And when the summer came along, he was flying a travel air out of Moose Creek. They had gone down in and they were standing by to go on what they called patrol. And a fire call came in and they took the travel air out, and he was flying the plane when they made the first jump. And so it's just been a part of me for as long as it's there. The two of them together were essentially the owners plus one other person, which was a guy by the name of Hale, who was a county surveyor, and among other things, a Ford dealer here. So he was some of the money, and it was pretty much of a shoestring operation in those early days. And it was mountain flying, in which they did an awful lot of it back into the backcountry airstrips and all of that was their forte. And then they did training in World War II, civilian Air Corps training before pilots were, like they had a very large program with affiliated with the university, which at that time was Montana State College, before it became the university. And so many of those cadets would get their pre-military training there and earn their licenses, and then when they went off to war, they would be steps ahead. So those were happening all over the country.